Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an IFBB Pro bodybuilder. Today's guest is Stan McQuay. Stan, welcome to the podcast.
What's up, man? Thanks for having me on.
For sure, Stan. I'm excited to chop it up with you. The first question that I have for you is, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
Let's see. A few of my favorite would probably be Chris Cormier, Kevin Levrone, Dexter Jackson. And I would say not necessarily, just because of their accolades, but mostly because they're my friends. Chris Cormier has been a mentor, a friend of mine since my amateur days. Same with Dexter, and Kevin Levrone was my training partner / coach for about a little over a year when I turned pro. And so we just with those three, I've always been very close. And Danny Hester as well. Danny has been actually an idol of mine, and we've become really good friends, and we live near each other. So these guys are like my friends,
Very cool. Very cool. So Stan, at what age did you start lifting weights? And then why did you start lifting weights at that age?
I didn't start lifting weights till I was probably around 20. Well, no, actually, I started while I was 19, 20. I've been training since I was, 9, 10 years old with martial arts. My father's always worked out. He still works out, but we never really did a lot of weights. I was in the martial arts. So like lifting weights was kind of counterproductive in our eyes. Never wanted to be big. It wasn't until I was my senior year going into college, I started lifting weights, and but didn't really get into bodybuilding until probably in my 25th year, just by accident too. Definitely was not even into bodybuilding. I was into lifting weights, but just wasn't into the bodybuilding thing.
Right. So tell me a little bit more, Stan, about your childhood, your upbringing. Talk a little bit more about martial arts and maybe some of the positive influences in your life when you're younger up to about high school, and then we'll transition from there.
Yeah, I always had like an appreciation for muscle. Just wasn't into the competition aspect. I was into martial arts. Bruce Lee was kind of like my idol. There was one particular movie when he was working out and flexing, and he started showing the lats. That's when I started to really have an appreciation for developing the body. I started doing calisthenics at a young age. All through high school and college, I was doing 1,000 sit-ups a night before bed. Really, not necessarily for the aesthetics, but just for the martial arts aspect. So, I did all types of martial arts most of my life up until probably my maybe the first 2 years of competing bodybuilding. I started to realize that I got to really commit to bodybuilding, because at that point I was doing jiu-jitsu, and trying to keep weight on, or trying to gain weight while I was doing jiu-jitsu was like almost impossible, it felt. So I said, you know what, I think I'm going to pass on that, and I'm just going to really focus on the lifting aspect. And so kind of like I fell into it like that.
Very cool. So talk to me a little bit about like your parents. What type of an influence did they have on you? Were you into school, not into school? Talk a little bit about some of those childhood memories that you have.
Yeah, my parents, they both worked. We came here from Japan. My father was in the military, so we came here. We didn't have a lot of money, so both my parents both worked full-time jobs. Luckily, the area that we moved into, there was a lot of kids on my block, and they all played sports. So I was very blessed to grow up in a neighborhood like the old days where kids actually stayed out all night, and you had to, drag us in to come into the house. But they all played football. We ran track, we wrestled. So we did all those type of sports. My parents weren't really, they weren't supportive in the aspect of, they were just always working. But luckily the kids in my neighborhood, they always took care of me. And I just enrolled in whatever the other kids did in the neighborhood. And, obviously we still did martial arts because that's something my father did. And he was very disciplined, very strict in that aspect. It was almost to the point where it was probably a little bit too much. But then again, here I am, and I'm very blessed that he did push me, because it did give me the drive and the willpower to make it through all these like hard diets, and to be disciplined for the training, because the martial arts training and the discipline, it all equates to the same with bodybuilding, and if you can do that, and you can really do anything in life, is the way I see it.
100%. No, that's super cool. So once you graduated high school, where did life take you?
Well, I mean, to go back to your previous question, I was always a good student. I think, you're a product of your environments. I happened to get in a fight my freshman year at one particular high school, and they had a no tolerance policy. So I got kicked out of there, ended up going to a high school, outside my area, and it was like night and day. It was like literally like I've never seen so much like violence and gang banging and all that in my life. So it's kind of like, I was a product of an environment. I came to that school, I didn't know anybody, I had to adapt. And that's kind of like where my life kind of took a change for the worse for the most part. I started gang banging, started getting in a ton of fights. I still played sports, all through high school and again through college, but like I just was hanging out with really bad people and doing bad things and spent, a lot of time in and out of jail. So it wasn't until like I really started my first year of, I would say my first year of real training for bodybuilding, that I really started to like wise up. It took a little while. I was still already into my 20s. I was still getting arrested, but I would have to say, like bodybuilding actually really did save my life, because I started to study it. I hired a coach or a trainer at the time, and he was like really putting me on with, what it takes to put muscle on. And I was always a small Asian kid, so I knew it was going to take a lot of work. So like by me focusing on the program that he would give me, it really kept me off the streets, and it literally saved my life. I have a few friends, that died at that time. I had my best friend who, about around the same time we started training, he went away for 25 years. He just got out. He ended up doing 27 years, and I made it through my whole bodybuilding career. And it was just like so crazy to think that, that could have been me, you know?
So before we transition to all things bodybuilding, kind of that street life a little bit that you just mentioned, when you were kind of involved in that, obviously you were young, and when we're young, we make unwise decisions, and we're not maybe always thinking about our future, right? But did you kind of know that there was more to life for you specifically than kind of that street life, or were you just kind of living life and you're just kind of going to figure it out as things unfolded?
Well, to be honest with you, like I didn't grow up in a bad neighborhood. I didn't grow up in a bad family, so I always had good influences around me. I just grew up with feeling like I had a chip on my shoulder, being, Asian, being small, being, picked on. So it was like a rebellious type of thing. Um, Going into the gym initially wasn't really just to play football. It was really because I wanted to get stronger to fight. So it was like a blessing that, we were in the gym, and buddies of mine wanted to enter a competition, which I thought was a hard body competition. Like we saw flyers, like one of those where you go to like the restaurant or the nightclub, and they pull the guys up, you take your shirt off and you flex, and whoever wins, so we all started getting ready for that. And it became a little competition, and I kind of cheated and went to another gym, which was a powerhouse gym in my area. And I've never seen guys like so jacked and just like big in my life. My gym didn't have that. And, I hired this guy. I said, I want to beat my buddies at this hard body show. He said, this is not a hard body show. This is actually competition. So we ended up going to that, and, it all started there. That's when I kind of got hooked.
Very cool. Very cool. So tell us, Stan, how that first competition went, and then just maybe start to unpack and unfold, your bodybuilding experience from the first show. Obviously you've competed a ton, so I don't expect you to remember or tell us everything, but maybe just some of the highlights of your amateur career. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I think really to continue on with the story I was just talking about, like probably the highlight for me was really the very first day of walking into that auditorium. It was a tournament of champions. I'll never forget. And there was a guy who won the show. He was Richard Jones. Richard Jones at the time was starting his amateur career, and he was amazing. But ESPN was there filming the competition, and I just remember watching and just thinking, that's not what I want to do. Meaning, these guys are in their speedos, and like me coming from the this background of trying to be tough, we would never be caught wearing even underwear like that. And I remember telling my buddies when I came back, this is definitely not for me. But ESPN was there, and it was they were filming, and at the time the TV show was called American Muscle. That was around in the 80s and early 90s. And the producers there, and they saw me in the audience. They came up and said, "Hey, you got a good look. You know, are you interested in competing?" I said, "Not my thing after seeing this." They said, "Really? Why not?" I said, "That's just not, I don't want to get in that Speedo. That's my thing." They said, "Well, would you want to be on TV?" And I was like, "Not really. I mean, doing what? Come to Venice Beach tomorrow, Sunday, early morning, 5 in the morning. If you're interested, you know, we might be able to do something with you." I had no clue what to expect. So I told my parents, I said, "I'm going to go. Let's see what they say." So I show up and Richard Jones was there, I remember, and they asked me like, you know, "Can you do some flex and you take your shirt off?" I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." Took my shirt off and they were like shocked at how ripped I was, you know. At that time they were already having a competition called Muscle Mania, which is a natural federation which is still around today. And basically they offered me a deal like if I would get ready for a competition and they can help document, you know, they would document it. It could lead to a lot of other opportunities. Took that contract home, read it, decided, you know what, I think I'll give it a shot. And literally from that day on, I got ready for Muscle Mania. I competed with the Muscle Mania Federation for several years, ended up turning pro with them. Really, I felt like it was probably the best path, the best route that I could have gone. You know, any bodybuilder could have gone is, you know, really mastering bodybuilding without using the drugs. I was really anti-drug then. I was anti-steroids. So, you know, I really like had an amazing coach, amazing nutritionist who showed me the ropes. And, you know, really like, you know, from like 97 to like 2000, like literally I was doing shows, you know, with creatine in my off season, you know, glutamine and like a few other natural supplements, but definitely no steroids, and I did fairly well. You know, it wasn't until I think it was 2000 where I said, you know what, I want to take my skills to the next level. And I remember I entered an NPC show. I qualified for the USAs, and I went and did my first USAs and took fourth in the middleweights. But I remember being backstage, and this is another defining moment for me, was being backstage and seeing all those guys that I used to see in the magazines. You know, it was like Tito Raymond, Tricky Jackson, a few different guys. And I was like, man, these guys are big. These guys are big, you know. And I had decided, you know, I'm going to study anabolics as much as I can, and I'm going to decide what I want to do. So that's what I did. You know, the next time I stepped on that NPC stage was 2002. It was no longer natural, and I won the USA's that year, my second shot at it. So no, those two shows are probably the most like memorable for me as an amateur, because, you know, like those were moments in my life where I had to make big decisions. You know, for one, to be able to compete, step on stage, that's a commitment. And then number two is, you know, to take steroids. You know, that was a huge commitment for me. And yeah, that was like a big defining moments in my career.
So I want to ask you, Stan, then, so, you know, you go to your first competition and you're like, no way, this isn't for me. You know, there's an opportunity presented to you. When did your mind kind of shift from, I'm not going to stand up on stage in underwear or a Speedo like that, to like, hey, you know what? I like this. I'm passionate about this. I love this. I'm going to pursue this. When was that moment where your mind shifted and you kind of said, you know what? I'm pursuing bodybuilding?
Well, it was actually that year 2000. I was getting ready for the USA's natural. I got my first contract shortly before that, so I was already like a sponsored athlete in 99 2000 with a company called ProLab, which I believe they're still around. ProLab was huge back then, and if I recall, my contract at the time, I was making, what was it, 5,000 a month. Okay, I'm making 5,000 a month as an amateur. And I said, you know what, that's pretty crazy. I started, I think I had like 2 or 3 other contracts. So literally like 25, 26, I was already making like, you know, around 8,000 a month lifting weights. And I said, I'm going to commit to this. Yes. So basically the money got me.
Hey man, that's pretty cool though, especially at that age. So one other thing I want to ask you about that I think is very important, especially because there's a lot of you know, younger listeners to the podcast. You know, that you said earlier, like you think it's important to master bodybuilding in terms of kind of like the natural side of things before you make a decision to step into the enhanced side of bodybuilding. Would you talk about that a little bit more, and maybe talk about maybe your mindset and what you were thinking about at that time, and what was the ultimate decision that kind of made you say, hey, I'm going to go from competing natural to enhanced, and maybe just share a thought or two to the younger listeners if they're maybe thinking about that or they're in that same position right now.
Yeah, luckily, like because of, right now I've been coaching athletes for over 20 years now. And, I get guys coming up to me all the time, like, hey, I want to get ready for show. I want to take steroids and whatnot. And, come to find out they really don't even know how to get in shape without using them. And I go back and tell the story. It's like, for one, I was, there was always a bad stigma to steroids, especially as a martial artist or someone that wasn't even in the bodybuilding world. It still has a negative aspect to it. So, I was already anti-steroid. I didn't want to look like those guys. I wanted to look like, like the guys look like in Muscle Mania for the most part. They look like athletes, not really bodybuilders. They're just like ripped athletes, a little on the thinner side. So I had no problem staying like that. But it wasn't until like, when you step on an NPC stage, it's just like you're going to a battle with a knife and everyone's got guns. That's kind of how I felt like. And it just like, the competitive side came out of me. But I knew I didn't want to just jump into something because obviously it was a drug. I just didn't want to take anything. I had already, been dieting my ass off. I mean, I still have some of these diets on paper that were really hardcore, even by today's standards. Like, but I was so blessed. I didn't know any different. I never fucked up on my diet because my coach told me at the time, if you eat this or if you fuck up this, you're going to be hating life being on stage and questioning yourself. Maybe I shouldn't have eaten that cookie. And that's why I took second or whatever. He'd always give me these little things in my head. It just stuck. I was so scared, I don't want to fuck up. They're going to see if I ate it, I'm going to be in my underwear on stage. So I kept telling myself things like that. So I never screwed up. I really paid attention to, if you told me this is what you're going to be eating, and I would pay attention to what it was doing. But I could also see it was still very hard to grow eating natural, or training naturally. So that's when I started studying. I literally studied, for a solid year. I picked up every book I could. Dan Duchesne's book at the time, whatever it was on the internet, I read like crazy, and I decided, I remember the first thing I ever took was Winstrol, and that's what I took for the 2002 show. And from that point on, it's still, I still saw like the guys were still bigger than me and whatnot. So I did some more studying, and I played with some things a little bit here and there. But luckily, it wasn't anything that I got too out of control. And it wasn't until I, got into my pro status where I started really like dabbling with other things. But to go back, kids come all the time. Everyone today wants the quick fix and to do things, do a shortcut. And they don't understand that it's not necessarily the drugs, it's the food. Food is what's going to make you grow, not the anabolics. The anabolics is like it's going to help you get there. But the food, if you don't know what you're doing with the food and know how to eat, it's not going to happen. I mean, I'm sure we all seen tons of guys that are in the gym, they're on steroids, but do they look like it? They don't look like it because they don't know what they're doing with the food. So I tell guys all the time, man, if you're not mastering, if you don't understand the food, don't even think about taking the steroids right now.
Great point. When did Dave Calick come into your life? And I know he's been your longtime coach. Why don't you just talk about him and what he's kind of added to your bodybuilding career?
Sure. So in 2006, I turned pro. I won the Nationals, which is going on today. I won the light heavyweights. But at the time, there was no other division in IFBB. There was only the open class. This is 2006. Okay. So it was a blessing in disguise. I won the USA's in 2002, didn't turn pro. I took second in nationals twice as a middleweight, didn't turn pro, but that was like 2003, 2004. So 2006, 6 years at the national level, not turning pro was a blessing in disguise because I was in every magazine there was as the top amateur guy in the nation. But once you turn pro, your career is for the most part done. If you're not like, a big guy, it's over. So 2006 came along, I got my pro card, but I kept telling myself that's pretty much the end of my competition career because I have no aspirations to get on stage with Ronnie Coleman. Like I just don't. But I heard through the office, through NPC, through IFBB that this new category was going to be coming out. And the first one was going to be a 205. I think it was a 205 at the time. And they were promoting it. And I remember I got a call from the NPC IFBB office saying, hey, you might want to look into this. I was always friends with Charles Glass over at Venice, and I trained there many times. And I kind of brought it up, said, "Hey, if I were to go that route, would you take me on?" He said, "Are you kidding me?" He goes, "I'm not only going to take you on, we're going to like hook you up, you know." So he introduced me to Dave Calick in 2008. So I said, "You know what? Let's do it." So we're gonna get ready for some shows, and I committed. I ended up training with Charles for about 5 years straight, and David was my coach. He took me to the next level. He's the one that really like taught me more about the anabolics, more about nutrition, that stuff that I didn't know. And I've been loyal to him. As a matter of fact, with my company now, Physique Inc, he's one of our head coaches with us now.
I love that. So just a little bit more on Dave. What was it? I know you talked about the anabolics, talked about the nutrition. Did you guys just kind of like connect as adults, as human beings? What is it that he kind of brought to you outside of the nuts and bolts that you're like, hey, you know what? I'm going to continue to be faithful and loyal to this guy, because especially once social media came to be, you see all the time these athletes jumping from coach to coach. So what was it about Dave that you're like, you know what, I'm sticking with him, I'm going to stay loyal to him? And then I want you to talk about too, Stan, because you're a longtime coach, a longtime trainer. Talk about the importance or the necessity of maybe sticking it out with a coach, you know, for at least an extended period of time, instead of that other route of coach hopping.
Yeah, man. I mean, you could see it today. I mean, granted, yeah, loyalty is just not quite there with a lot of these athletes. But at the same time, a lot of these coaches aren't the best quality either. So, when it comes to David, I already knew my stuff when it came to food. Okay. But like, you could always learn more. And just by sitting with him a few times and listening to his theories on carb cycling, on keto way back in the day, I thought this guy really knows what he's talking about. And then especially with the anabolics, peptides, all these new things that were coming out at the time, I said, you know what, I'm going to be a pro. I'm going to take this from a pro aspect. I'm going to treat myself like a pro. So I'm going to take him on. I had the best trainer in the business at the time was Charles Glass, and he was recommended Dave Calick. So I said, you know what, let's do it. So I committed to that. And, with him, we had an amazing pro career with him. I've been with him my whole, entire pro career. For our very first show, I won my pro debut. And then ended up won 4 Olympias. It could have been 5, but I didn't go to my last one. But like, this things like this couldn't be achieved without, sticking with someone like Dave and developing over the years. It's not like we just did the one diet and we stuck to that same diet. I mean, literally, every year is a different diet, completely different diet, because your body changes, you grow, and it just things are so different. So, by me sticking with Dave, with one coach, he knew my body. He knew what I responded to. He paid well attention to what was going on. And I couldn't see myself really going with anybody else and trying to start all over.
So then I want you also just to talk about, again, maybe speaking to some of the younger listeners, or somebody that's looking for a coach for the first time, or maybe they're thinking about switching coaches. Just talk about the importance, again, Stan, of maybe just like sticking out with a coach, or if you are looking for a coach, what should these younger listeners be looking for? Like, what makes a great coach?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of guys online right now that are, saying they're online coaches or calling themselves gurus because they can say big words, or they've read a couple of books and they understand macros or whatever. But like, in reality, man, like you can know all those things, but if you can't really apply them, like, apply them whether to other athletes or even to yourself, to me, that's a red flag. Granted, like, not all great coaches had amazing competition careers. But I think, like, when it comes to someone like me, I've been through the ringer. I've like I say, I've mastered bodybuilding naturally. I've mastered body using anabolics. Every direction, we've done it all. And when it comes to like a lot of these coaches, I have new athletes come to me and they say, "Well, this coach said I should take this, that," and I'll tell them right off the bat, I think that's a bad coach, because they're already talking about all these anabolic cycles and peptides and all these things that you should be on. But like, that's not the way you should be approaching this, So I don't know, like there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of information that's accessible on the internet that's not always a good thing either, right? You know, you can read a lot of bad information. There's a lot of coaches on there that can, you know, say all these great things about themselves, but like just do your research, ask around, you know, like really there are a lot of good coaches out there, but there's a ton of bad ones.
For sure. So give me a few highlights of your pro career. Like you mentioned, your pro debut was the Jacksonville Pro in 2009. You won that, qualified for the Olympia, 4-time Olympian, 5-time IFBB Pro champ. Just maybe touch on a couple of those highlights during your pro career, please, Stan.
Yeah, sure. So it was a pretty cool career, the way I look at it. You know, like winning my pro debut, and then kind of growing with the IFBB. We went from a 205 to a 202 division to a 212 division. I won in the 202 division. I won in the 212, and then with the inception of the Classic Physique, I won at that level too. So, you know, coming up and down and trying all different types of diets and your body changing in different aspects, it was a great experience. You know. That definitely nothing I regret. I'm very blessed that I was actually able to make it, you know, literally almost 25 years of competing without being ill, without having injuries or just giving up. You know, like literally I retired on stage. My final year of competing in Classic was 2018. And I told my wife, okay, this is the year. If I don't, you know, qualify or I don't do anything, this is it. And I end up winning my final show. And I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to do the Olympia because I just don't want to ruin that feeling of what it feels like to make it through all these years unscathed and healthy.
So talk about maybe that first Olympia appearance. What was that like? I mean, again, winning your pro debut and then being able to step on the Olympia stage, that sometimes is something that IFBB pros, they never win a show. They never qualify for the Olympia. That happened for you right away. So why don't you talk about that experience of stepping on the Olympia stage after winning your pro debut?
Yeah. So again, I started with Charles. We trained a solid year getting ready for that show because after 2006, I really was only like working out just to stay in shape. I was not trying to be big. So when I came to him, I think, you know, it was the 202 division. I literally came to him. I was about 180 pounds getting ready for my pro show. So we grew into that show. I think I weighed 192 on my pro debut, which was a Jacksonville Pro, and it was in August. Was not expecting to win. Of course, I'm going in expecting to win, but literally, I didn't think I was going to win my pro debut. End up winning and going to the Olympia, like literally, like I forgot when that was, but it was shortly after, October, November, something like that. And that was the first show I've ever actually been truly nervous in. And that was another learning experience too. I remember being at the hotel in Vegas. Charles came to my room, Dave came to my room, got into the lights that morning. I said, oh man, this is probably the most ripped I've ever been. I was so nervous, get in the car, we're driving to the venue. I couldn't eat. I couldn't eat. I ate very little being backstage. I was just a nervous wreck. And I remember I came out on stage for that prejudging, and I can see the guys, my whole crew sitting on stage, and I see their jaws drop. They're like, I was like, what? And they're like, I come backstage, like, I was so washed out, so flat. The cortisol levels were through the roof. Didn't eat. Just looked like shit. It was the worst placing. I never placed out of like, I think first, second. I was always first, second, and everything. And taking like a 16. 16th is like, you know, a past 15th, you're last basically. So never been in that position. So yeah, I took an ass beating there. And that was quite the experience. And it made me really hungry though, like to really like commit to like, okay, now I'm gonna do this. You know, that was quite the experience, and it was the best ever. So that's when I decided I'm going to really commit all out for bodybuilding.
Talk to us a little bit then, Stan, about you've already brought up Charles Glass, but you know, I'm sure most of the people that are going to be watching this, listening to this, they're familiar with him. We've seen, you know, a gluttony of YouTube videos with him training all kinds of top athletes. But what was it that Charles kind of brought to you? So you're training a certain way, and then you get connected with Charles. What did he kind of bring to you? Just kind of the same thing with Dave. What did Charles bring to you in terms of advancing your training and just kind of helping you to take it to the next level in terms of bodybuilding?
Yeah, I think a couple of things come to mind when it comes to Charles. Like for one, it was just his presence of being there with his background and taking me on. It just really put me in the right state of mind to really step my game up, because now I'm, you know, we all know that Charles has trained with, Flex Wheeler, Chris Cormier, Paul Delay, like you name it, like tons of champions. So it put me in the right state of mind where, okay, now I'm surrounded by champions, from one. Number two, he literally, I remember the first month he took me in there, he pretty much put me in check. He was had me doing exercises my way, and like, which was all wrong for the most part, and like really like humbled me, because when I started doing his way, I couldn't really lift very much. But he really made me like find more of a connection between, the mind muscle connection. I'm sure you hear about it all the time, but it was like I always thought I had it, but like when I was training with him, it was a lot different. Now, the most unique thing about Charles is he's all about angles. Charles can take a machine, let's say example, a hammer incline machine. Most people sit on it a certain way and you just push it in a certain angle, but he'll come with his pads, have you sit in a different position. And, like he's really good at changing angles and making every machine in there hit a different type of muscle. So I think he really helped me develop my body in a much different way. And you can see the detail was much different as a pro, and all his athletes. He puts a lot of work into showing them his secrets.
What were, because you've had such a long career, Stan, and a successful career in terms of your health and winning and making it to the Olympia, what were some things like outside of the gym that you did to kind of preserve your physique, your health? Was there, chiropractic work, deep tissue work? Talk about some of that recovery stuff, because I think that's something, it's getting better, but I think that's still something that, especially younger people getting into bodybuilding, they just think about, destroying their bodies in the gym, eating a bunch of food. If we're going to talk about anabolics, there's anabolics. I still think there's a huge growth in terms of the importance of recovery. So why don't you talk about that in your career, what that looked like, please?
Well, luckily, coming from the background that I came from with martial arts, we'd always, stretching and doing these type of things was always a part of my workouts. It wasn't until I turned pro and started using heavier anabolics and really growing that you started realizing that like some of these guys are so damn stiff and you can see it. That's not good. And that's why a lot of these injuries started happening. I remember reading the magazines, and I remember reading Linda Murray was talking about one of the most important aspects of her career was always stretching and keeping the muscles elongated. And for some reason, that always stuck with me, and I'd always done it anyways. But once I started, like in 2010, I would say, I really started noticing just how stiff I was getting, even with my stretching. So I started realizing like, injuries started happening. Like minor injuries, even if it was like a tennis elbow or pinched nerve in your neck, all these little things started happening, often. And the closer you got to shows, the harder your body got, the worse I started feeling. So I really started implementing massage and chiropractic. I've always done chiropractic. When I was getting ready for shows, I would visit the chiropractor twice a week, and I would get deep tissue once, sometimes twice a week. If I could afford it, I would have done more. It's just that to find the right person to do it, and it's expensive and it's time consuming and it's a lot. But like if you want to take your career, as far as you can go, I think it's utterly important, especially if you're an older guy, that you got to do these things. And most of the guys don't do it because it's so draining. The amount of training you're training, 5, 6, 7 days a week, an hour and a half, 2 hours a day with all that cardio. If you're getting ready for show, an hour of posing, it's a ton of work to be a good bodybuilder. But if you want longevity, that's probably the reason why I was able to last 25 years without having no tears, no injuries, nothing. And I didn't train like a pussy. I trained hard, but I took care of myself. I couldn't stand how it would feel outside the gym. So I was really proactive about taking care of that. And, as probably the last 5 years of my pro career, I really pushed guys saying like, this is like almost just as important as your training. You got to commit to taking care of yourself outside the gym, whether it's, foam rolling on your own. No matter what, you should be stretching, but if you can afford to get, a good masseuse or deep tissue person, that really will take your body to the next level, I feel.
Excellent. What was the deciding factor, Stan, back in 2018 for you to retire from bodybuilding?
Well, it was actually 2014 when I started really contemplating whether I want to do this anymore. Not because I was in the 212 division, and I remember I took seventh. I think was it twice or two times in a row. I took seventh or around that time. I don't remember the exact placing, but seventh was the best I've ever done. But I remember standing backstage and looking at Flex Lewis, and I love Flex. I remember standing backstage though, and I couldn't stop staring at like his calves, his forearm tie-ins, his lat tie-ins, all these like muscles on him, and just thinking, dude, I'm killing myself. I'm like, literally, I'm for sure I'm training harder than this guy. I'm eating more food than this guy. I might even be taking more drugs than this guy. I'm not going to look better than this guy because we're all like, for the most part, doing all those things equally. But the missing thing at that point is the genetics. I have amazing genetics, but like he has the genetics to be Mr. Olympia. And I just remember looking at that and going, my calves never going to look like that. I'm never going to beat him on these certain aspects. And it doesn't mean it made me want to give up. It's just that like, how much more am I going to beat my body up to get better? Like, okay, maybe I could probably beat this guy. I could probably beat that guy. Maybe I could slip in a third, fourth, fifth, but it's like, is it really worth me really committing and taking the drugs that I'm taking? I have 3 kids now too. So that's another thing right there that really gave me a different outlook on life. So it's easier for me to say, oh, I'm just not going to do this anymore because, I had a great career. I've done 4 Olympias, but like, fact of the matter is that's what I went through. And then that's what it was. Being backstage and kind of rationalizing, I don't think I'm going to get any better without like hurting myself.
Cool. I appreciate the transparency, Stan. So talk to me a little bit. I want to get into a business talk a little bit, right? So you said, you're 2021, you get that, you had a few contracts, you're making like $8 grand a month, which that's not bad, especially at that age. But there's been a lot of accolades for you. You talked about the magazines and just a lot of success, right? And I'm sure with that success, there's been financial success, financial security as well. How have you been able to maybe capitalize on your physique, competing, your success on stage in terms of business and being financially secure, setting yourself up and your family up for the future? So just talk about the business side of things, maybe some of those smart moves or smart investments that you've made over the years, if you don't mind.
Well, for one, I think being in the right place in the right time has really benefited me. I grew up in Los Angeles. I happened to grow up in the Valley. And at the time, through most of my career, I literally grew up in the same neighborhood that Weider Publications was at. The gym I trained at was a powerhouse gym. So it was the only hardcore gym in the Valley. So if you're a bodybuilder, you're in town, or you work for Weider Publications, you're at my gym. Just so happened that I worked there too, and I trained clients there. So there's a tons of opportunities that always came up. Hey, you're in shape. Do you want to shoot? I never said no. That's why if you read the magazines in the 90s and 2000s, I was in every magazine there was because I put the work in, So I always looked at like, yeah, I was a bodybuilder, but like I used to get pissed off at guys like Sean Ray, and they would say stuff like, oh, he's a model, he's an athlete. I used to get so mad back then. But the fact of the matter is, yeah, to me, I was a model first. I was a bodybuilder second. I just happened to be good at bodybuilding, But I did the bodybuilding. I kept doing the shows. Obviously, I like to compete, and I wanted to get accolades. But my goal wasn't really to be Mr. Olympia. My goal was to be on covers, because covers is, to me, for one, was what was getting me paid. For the future, it's getting me notoriety, it's getting me laid at the time. So all those things, that to me, the covers were the thing. So, I ended up accumulating over 100 covers over my career. And so I always looked at, okay, I'm getting ready for shows. Yes, I want to win. But like, if you really looked at what I was doing behind the scenes, every time I was getting ready for a show, I always had like 5, 6, 7 photo shoots already lined up around the competition time. When the competition was over, I flooded. I mean, I wanted to make people sick of seeing my face, and that was my goal. So from a business standpoint, yeah, I did the shows so I could look good for the pictures. That's kind of what I did.
For sure. Now, obviously we don't have to get into too many details, but when you started having this financial success, did you have anybody kind of mentor you or kind of help you in terms of like investing your money or getting into real estate, anything like that, or not?
Well, I didn't really have anyone helping me, but what I did notice was no one was doing it. No one was taking care of themselves. And that to me was a turnoff. because you know, I've always had a kind of a business mindset. So I saw that no one was investing their money. No one was really making money, or the guys that were making money, they were blowing it on cars or whatever they were blowing it on. And I just said, that's just not gonna be me, you know? So I was always kind of frugal. I always saved all my money, invested really well. And I always kept telling myself, I got to do something because I don't know how long this bodybuilding thing is going to last. So I always try to parlay anything that was bodybuilding into making money, and end up, you know, trying different personal training ventures. And finally, I've been with one now with Physique Inc, where like we really like blew things up. And I've got 8 coaches that work for me now. And, you know, it's like I said, bodybuilding, I parlayed into other things. I didn't necessarily make money from bodybuilding, but bodybuilding helped me make money in a lot of other aspects.
So why don't you talk about Physique Inc? How did that come to be? Talk about maybe some of the coaches that you have. You already mentioned Dave's on the team, but just talk about how that came to be, Physique Inc, and just the evolution and what's kind of the vision. What's the goal with that business, with that coaching?
Sure. So I don't remember what year it was, but bikini came out before in these other divisions. Bikini came out, and we all saw what happened there. That was booming. The next thing that was going to come out was the men's physique, and that was around 2006, 2007, I believe. I don't recall exactly when. But I saw what happened with bikini. We'd go to these shows, and there was like these teams, like the team thing was never a thing ever. Even have really a coach. I mean, back in the day, there was like a guru. It was a Chad Nichols. There was a George Farah. You know, very small handful of guys that were gurus, but there was definitely no team, because bodybuilding was never a team thing. But you would go to these shows and you see these huge teams of girls, and like, man, it was like they were making money. That's how I saw it. I saw it as they're making money. It was corny as hell, but so we knew that men's physique thing was coming out, and there was a NPC judge here who was kind of giving me the inside of talking about what was going to happen. And he said, he was one of the first men's physique guys that was getting ready for shows. He said, we should start marketing that. And I said, you know what? I think you're right. Because I could see those, no offense, but those type of guys would really cling on to that. And so that's what we did. You know, initially we started as a men's physique team in 2007, I believe it was. And that's how we kind of like went after that market. And we did really well from the start. But then I started to realize, like, I didn't want it to turn into some fluffy team. And that's kind of what it was. And dealing with back then, some of the men's physique guys were just like, they're like chicks. I just couldn't handle it, man. So I kind of got away from that. But that's how it started. We started off as that, as really trying to capture that market and handling the men's physique guys.
So is that kind of like, because I heard somebody recently, you know, in terms of like personal training, I own my own gym. I train here at my gym. I heard somebody recently say something about, you know, there's a limitation when you're doing in-person personal training. There's only so much growth that you can do when it's just one person. So is that kind of what you've done, bringing on those 8 coaches, you know, to kind of continue to grow the business, make more money, have more impact? You know, taking it from just like you doing one-on-one in person to taking it online, getting more coaches. Is that really how, as a trainer coach, you can expand and really grow a training business?
Yeah, so I trained clients for over 20 years. You know, what happened was, you know, as you know, getting ready for the shows, it's a ton of work. You know, you're basically babysitting people. You know, you're holding their hands, getting ready for the shows. They're waiting for you to tell them to do every little aspect, and it's a lot of stress. When these people are getting ready for shows, it's almost the same as if I'm getting ready for a show. You know, but it's fine. That's why we get paid to do what we do, and I love doing what I do. But I took it to another level, and I said, you know what? If you can come and hire me as a coach, what if I said I can offer you 2, 3, 4 coaches that help you get ready for a show as well? And that's kind of what we do now. So like example, if you want to get ready for a show, you know, I've got all these other coaches, and whoever's available, we'll team up, we'll triple team some people, we split the money, and we're not greedy. You know, it makes all of our jobs much more efficient. Plus every one of our athletes, they get 3 pros looking at them. You know, to me, that's a plus. So that's kind of like how we handle our stuff.
Very cool. So talk to me a little bit. You brought up your kids just a minute ago. talk about fatherhood. Obviously for most people that changes people's lives one way or the other, but how did fatherhood kind of change you, change your perspective? And I want to ask you too, Stan, what are some of those values or principles that you are working on, you and your wife, to instill in your kids?
Yeah. So like I was saying earlier, like if you can get ready for a show and make it through 16 weeks without, messing up, you can do anything, because I think getting ready for a show and changing your body that dramatically has got to be one of the hardest things of any sport. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of technical things with golf or whatever you name that are hard to do, but like the amount of mental toughness you need to have to get ready for a show, and if you can do it, like you can do anything, because it's not just like the physical too, mental and physical. It requires a lot to get ready for a show. So I always tell my kids, I did all these things, and you can do them too. So like, it's not just even that. It's teaching them a healthy lifestyle, of not even competing, but just to work out, to eat healthy. So I'm just blessed that I was able to go this far, but I didn't want to push it any further. While I'm still healthy, I just want to teach my kids, the right things to do when it comes to eating and training, not necessarily bodybuilding, but like, just to never give up,
For sure. What is kind of like your future goal or future vision for yourself personally? Yes, we know you got the Physique Inc. I'm sure that's going to be a big part of your future, but are there some other big goals now that you're done competing that you're kind of chasing after? Just talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of I call them bucket list things now, because they're not really like priorities in my life. Whereas before, I've been a part of 3 projects now, trying to open these gyms. And you say you're a gym owner, so it's a ton of work. It's really hard to open a gym and to run one correctly. And I have a lot of friends that have gyms, and they're married to the gym, making no money. And I told myself I didn't want to do that. So luckily, I do have other business ventures right now. So like opening a gym is kind of lower on the list, but that is something I still want to do. I still want to open a gym. I want to open a clinic, a TRT clinic, home hormone therapy. I want to do that. It's huge out here in Los Angeles. So I want to tie those things in together still. So that's kind of a project, a background project I've been working on for the last 2-3 years. It's just I haven't pushed it too much yet. I'm just waiting for the right opportunity and the right time on that.
For sure. And I'm sure 2020, especially being out there in California, probably put a little halt to that, right?
Oh my God. I literally had secured a facility maybe 3 months before COVID hit. I'm so blessed that we didn't close the deal on that, because I had a 10,000 square foot facility we were about to open, and we pulled out of that right before. So thank God that didn't happen.
For sure, for sure. So we're gonna wrap it up here in a minute. I wanna ask you a couple more things, Stan, and then we'll close it out. Talk to me about dark sport. I've had a couple other athletes. King George was on the podcast. A couple other athletes that are connected with dark sport. But talk about that brand. How did you get connected with them, and what is kind of their goal or their vision in terms of what they're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, it's pretty cool, man. Like I've worked with 1 or 2 other clothing companies through my career, but I was really just kind of collecting checks then, and it wasn't until these guys came along, and the owners, they're young, they have another clothing line, but the background that they had was really similar to mine. They're kind of like street guys. They were surfers, skaters, break dancers, in the martial arts, so all those things. And they came at me with the idea that they wanted to start a line that wasn't too flashy, wasn't like your typical bodybuilder wardrobe. I said, hey man, that sounds pretty interesting to me. But really it was the theme behind it. It wasn't just how the clothes looked. The clothes obviously look pretty cool, and it's really basic for the most part, but what what they're about, and it's the same motto that I've kind of been talking to you about, of never give up. One of their main mottos is never fucking give up, and it's all about, the drive and the willpower to just, if you have a goal in mind, you just keep pushing forward. And that's really what they're pushing with the clothing, not just something that looks good. And they just happen to sign like all the best guys in the industry for the most part. They got Dorian Yates, they signed Chris Cormier, Dexter Jackson, Kevin Levrone, as I mentioned. So they're collecting a lot of the legends in the sport as well. So, and all the top men's physique guys. So It's a great company to work for.
Very cool. So talk to me a little bit. I've got tattoos myself. You've got some ink. When did you start getting tattoos, and are you gonna cover your whole body, or what's your mindset with that?
What's funny, like I've always had some tattoos, but I made sure I didn't touch anything else once I started getting like that national level back in the day. But I started realizing, like I said, after that moment when I mentioned to you about flex, I said, you know what? Okay, I'm not going to take bodybuilding so serious anymore. I'm going to just start doing what I want to do. So it literally, I remember I started a huge back piece. I was still competing, but I started a back piece, and the Arnold Classic said they were going to have a 212 division, and I was like, shit, man, I gotta see if I can get on. So I applied because you have to submit to get in there, and I got on, but I was like 50% into starting a back piece. I said, oh, this is not going to go well. So, but you know what? Screw it. I love bodybuilding. I mean, we're doing this, just for the love of it and because it's the Arnold. So I got on stage, and I remember I turned around, and I can hear the audience go, what the fuck did he do? Like, what? And I remember turning back around, I'd see Steve Weinberger going, what the fuck did this guy do? Like, I don't know what I placed. So I think I took like seventh or whatnot, but and I heard a lot of slack. Like, what is this guy, a moron? He's bodybuilding, he's doing the forbidden, he's getting a whole back piece. But like, I don't care, like I do this for fun, and so yeah, I did a full back piece. I got like 50 hours on my back. I started doing my neck. I don't know if I'm gonna do my whole body. I still have a few more things I want to do, but like, no, I love tattoos. It's addicting, as you know, right?
For sure. Dude, I've got to ask you, the neck tattoo. I mean, is that like a whole nother pain level, or is it really not that bad?
That's so funny you asked, man. So with the neck, usually like in certain body parts, you ask people like, does that hurt? How's that feel? I didn't really ask him on the neck because, you shave, you cut yourself. It never really hurts, right? I was doing the pinch test, scratch, like, dude, that doesn't feel like anything. I went there. I didn't bring no like Norcos. I didn't bring any cream, nothing. I went, and the minute this guy started on me, within 10 minutes, I was like jumping a little bit. And I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Like, I got 50 hours on my back, and that shit hurt. But this guy was barely starting. He was like, oh, you got to relax. I'm like, fuck, dude. So we take our first break, like 3 hours into it. And I go, man, I didn't really think that it was going to hurt that much. And he goes, really? You didn't think I was going to hurt? And he goes, look around. I was in a really big tattoo shop. It was like maybe 15 tattoo artists in there. I think maybe 4 guys had their necks done. He goes, there's a reason why most guys don't have their necks. It fucking hurts. And I was like, man, I had designed this all the way down to here. I'm not kidding you. It was a 2-day. I came all the way to Vegas for a 2-day thing. I was like, let's cut it to here because I don't think it'll look better. It's the first time I ever bitched out on anything. I made up some lame excuse. I think it's gonna go better here, and I couldn't finish it. It hurt so damn bad.
Yeah, dude. I've got so much respect for those of you who get those neck tattoos, because every time I see one, I'm just like, dude, you can say I'm gonna give you $1 million. I'd be like, oh wait, man, I'm not. I've got my. Go ahead.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I literally didn't think. I thought this was going to be the least amount of pain of all of them. And it was like when you hit that jawline, oh my god, I was dying.
Yeah.
Adam's apple. Oh my god.
Yeah, I got both of my hands done, and that was pretty painful. But no neck tattoos for me, man. So kudos to you. So Stan, last question here. What do you think is the biggest lesson or takeaway from bodybuilding specifically for you?
Well, to be honest with you, like it's really the compensation that a lot of these guys are, they're giving a lot. They're giving a lot to the sports. They're putting themselves through a lot, and granted, now with Jake Wood involved, he has been up in the antes on like the top shows, but like still a lot of these shows, there's been shows I won and I got a $2,000 check. I just took that check and I gave it right to Charles because like $2,000 not really going to do much for me, and he deserves every bit of it because he literally trained me for free for years. So anytime I got money, I would literally just give it to him. But like the way the athletes are taken care of, I think there needs to be a little bit more. For one. Number two, The sport has gotten definitely a little bit out of hand with the drug use. The criterias, I think it's going to have to come down to the judging, you can't keep awarding guys that are going to keep coming in, either abnormally big or extremely ripped, like beyond ripped to where, like they're suffering from that. And I think certain things like that need to be looked at. And I think they are being addressed now.
For sure. All right, Stan. So before I close this out today, I just kind of want to give you the opportunity to share any final thoughts, any final words. If people want to connect with you on Instagram or anywhere else, make sure you share that information. If somebody wants to reach out for coaching or anything like that, make sure you give the Instagram for Physique Inc. as well. So final thoughts, the platform is yours.
Yeah. So if any of you guys out there that want to be in the best shape of your life and be with someone that's been through the gamut, I've competed at all levels and I've made money at this sport. If you want to, do something with your career, contact me. I'm at Stan the Man McQuay on Instagram, but if you want to contact us, again, I do have 8 coaches. I want to give a shout out to my coaches, IFBB Pros, Andrew Walker, Dominic Cardone, James Juge, Matty Helms, I can't name everybody. Dave Calick, of course, as we mentioned, Terry Harrison. So got a lot of coaches. We got a ton of experience, more than any team out there on the market right now. And feel free to hit us up.
Cool. So Stan, I just want to say thank you so much for taking some time to share your story and chop it up with me and share a little bit of your wisdom and knowledge. It's appreciated. Okay.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're very welcome. All of you who are tuning into another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, I just want to say thank you to you. I just appreciate all of you, because if it wasn't for you, the podcast wouldn't exist. So thank you for coming back again, listening to another episode. Just a few things as we wrap up this episode with Stan. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're not listening to this on YouTube, I would just ask that you go to YouTube, type in Behind the Muscle, and make sure you hit that subscribe button. That's important because I release all of these episodes first on YouTube and then distribute them to the other podcast platforms. Another huge favor on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button. And then I would also ask that you would go down into the comment section and just leave maybe your favorite takeaway from Stan's story or something that we had a conversation about today. Give me some feedback. I always appreciate the comments, the feedback. And then one last favor I'd ask of all of you, if you guys would take this episode specifically of Behind the Muscle and share it on your Instagram stories, make sure you tag Stan, tag Physique Inc., and tag Behind the Muscle. That would be greatly appreciated. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.